Hello, welcome to the Loney Show. I'm your host, John Maloney. In this episode, no regulars, because reasons, I guess. As for our guest, she's from Los Angeles, California. Currently, she's an author, a book promoter, a rock star interviewer, radio newscaster, and much, much more. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Laurie K.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you too. So, how's life?
Well, life is doing pretty good because my book is recently released and it's called Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, My Life Leading Up to John Lennon's Last Interview. And it's the story of my rock radio related early life and career wrapped around what tragically turned out to be Lennon's last day on the planet, December 8th, 1980, which I was unbelievably able to spend a major part of with him and Yoko Ono at the Dakota. And I felt like I'd begun to make lifetime friends. Sadly, that couldn't happen because John was shot and killed mere hours after our get together. Ugh.
Oh, that is very sad.
Yes, I still call it the best and the worst day of my life.
I to a sentence I never thought I would ever hear.
Yes,
So,
it's true.
yeah. So now that got me thinking. Have have there been any other celebrities you have met at some point?
Oh, of course. Well, before John and Yoko, we interviewed Paul and Linda McCartney in their latest lineup of Wings. That was back in June 1979 with the release of Back to the Egg, and that was a great interview. And then I solo interviewed George Harrison at the tail end of 1978. That was really cool too. And I also did a solo interview with George Martin, incredible producer, of course. And that was in January 1980 after his bio came out, All You Need Is Ears. And that was wonderful. And he was cool and gave me great autograph. And I've had so many wonderful musician interviews, and including everybody not related to the Beatles, including the Ramones and Talking Heads and Little Richard and on, so many more.
Wow, yes, absolutely. Is there anything else you're currently up to or currently working on at the moment?
Well, no, I'm pretty much working on getting people to hear about my book and promote it and publicize it. And, unfortunately, with COVID hitting back 4 years ago, TV production pretty much came to a close. So the bad part is I immediately had to stop working on TV. I was doing everything from promos to pilots to sizzle reels, you name it. But when that stopped, that's when I was able to finally start writing my book after 40 plus years of waiting to do so. And I really haven't gone back to work much since then. I've done some, but basically I'm retired from TV production because I'm more concentrated on Confessions of a Rock and Roll Name Dropper, my life leading up to John Lennon's last interview.
All right then. So, are there any other jobs or opportunities you haven't done yet that you would like to do someday?
Well, to be honest, I've done so many. I honestly can't think of any that I haven't tried yet, except maybe to do a documentary, TV or film, about my book, to tell my story on film. I mean, I've talked about it on a number of TV specials and radio specials and podcasts and that kind of thing, but I would love to do my own documentary and be able to tell my story that way.
Okay, I can see that. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Well, I'm originally a SoCal gal. I was born and raised in Southern California, and even though I moved and lived so many other places ever since, everywhere from all over the Bay Area, San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland, Mill Valley, and in the Midwest. I was on the air as a radio newscaster in Omaha, and then up in Seattle, Washington, I was also on the radio, and then back in San Francisco and on the air again. And I then moved to New York to start writing TV shows and moved to New Zealand eventually, just for a couple months to start working on the DVD release of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. And so I've been all over. And actually, one of the favorite places that I've ever lived was while I was in between colleges. When I first dropped out, I moved to Bali in Indonesia to study Balinese dance, and that was really exciting. So I've lived a lot of great places. I'm very happy to be in Los Angeles now, and also the SoCal desert's great. Joshua Tree is exciting. I have property there, so I'm there a lot. But LA is pretty much the city of my dreams.
Sweet.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you were given 500 acres of land, what would you use that land for?
Well, that's an interesting question because it would depend. Is it in a big city? Is it in a rural area? For example, I have a recording studio on my property in Los Angeles, and in my property in Joshua Tree in the desert, I have a guest cabin. So I do short term vacation rentals for people who want to stay out in Joshua Tree right next door to the national park, which is very cool. And so, what else could I do? I mean, I could have a film studio as well. There's so many possibilities.
Yeah, there sure are. Would you rather speak all languages or talk to animals?
Well, I feel like I do talk to animals because my dog, my little Chihuahua Lola, uh, is somebody who seems to understand me, and especially when I sing to her. And she's not named after the Kink song about Lola. She's actually named after the Barry Manilow song that mentions Lola, and so I sing that to her, and songs that I've written for her. So I'm pretty good about talking to my pets over the years, as well as those of friends. And as far as speaking languages, I spoke Indonesian for a while. I don't really remember much now, and I studied German a lot over the years in school and college. So those were pretty much the two that I spoke other than English.
Okay, nice, very good. I'm
Thank you.
also, you're welcome. I'm also learning a couple languages because it just helped to keep my cognitive brain functioning later in life.
What are you learning?
So I'm learning about at least 10 languages at the moment, all at the same time too. So it's at least keeps me busy for a while.
Wow, I bet.
Where was the furthest you traveled to from where you were originally from?
No doubt that was Bali in Indonesia. That was a very, very, very long trip. And then later, actually, just back in 2003 and 2004, of course, going to New Zealand took quite a while as well. So, those are like 15-hour plane rides, as I remember, and definitely took a lot of time. But the trips were worth it because what I did there was incredible. I loved studying Indonesian dance, Balinese dance on Bali, and seeing the sights there, the beaches, surfers, all that stuff. And then I loved being in Wellington, New Zealand, working on the Lord of the Rings DVD release. So it's all been very exciting. I have to say I can't think of any bad times I've had with travel.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. What improved your life quality so much you wish you did it sooner?
That's a good question. Probably having long-term relationships with the man I love and I'm married to now. Wish I'd met him years and years ago, as opposed to my first husband, who didn't work out at all. So that would have been great to be with him longer. And I actually started everything else pretty early. My career started out in radio when I was 20. So I basically um, ended up leaving college, journalism school, because I got an internship in the news department at the top AM radio station in the country, which was in San Francisco, called KFRC AM. And once I started working there as an intern, even just after a couple weeks, I was so popular, and they thought I had so much talent as a writer and a reporter that they immediately said they would offer me a job as soon as possible. And I ended up getting a job as their news editor, which sent me on the way towards being a newscaster. So I did all that in my early 20s. So basically, I think I was right on target.
Fantastic. Now that's quite an achievement.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. If your mind was an island, what would it look like?
Well, probably the two islands that I've spent the most time on, one being Bali, which is in Indonesia, and is a beautiful island. And granted, I was there in the mid 70s, so that was years and years ago. And I'm sure it's changed a lot now. It's certainly gotten a lot more popular with a lot more tourists. And no doubt a lot more building. When I was there, they didn't have radio, they didn't have TV, and mostly they had people coming from closer by Australia. So I'm sure it's very, very different now. So I would love for my mind to look like Bali. But on the other hand, I've also spent a lot of time on Hawaii, the big island called Hawaii, which is in Hawaii. And that's an incredible island too. So anything with beaches does it for me.
Honestly, I'd say the same thing. I'd love being in warm climates and next to the beach.
And that's a cool thing about LA is I am very near the beach. And growing up here, I spent almost every day after school at the beach and going body surfing and all that. So yes, it's very exciting for me. Always has been, no doubt always will be.
Yes, my favorite.
Hmm.
Who was the last person you've talked to?
You mean interview wise?
Like in general, up until this point.
Well, I talked to my husband this morning, if that's what you're talking about. But if you're talking about celebrity interviews, um, that's an interesting question because I wasn't interviewing him, but I happened to meet finally after all these years Sean Ono Lennon, John and Yoko's son, and I had waited for over 40 years to find out if he had received the toy that I brought for him when I went to the interview with John and Yoko at the Dakota. I brought him a wind up spark fire breathing metal dragon toy. And although Sean wasn't there that day because he was out with his nanny while John and Yoko were being interviewed by my RKO radio team, um, Yoko said, "Oh, wow, you know, not only will Sean love this, but John will love this. So we may not give it to him. We may just play with it ourselves," which made me laugh. And of course, John being shot and killed that day, I figured maybe Yoko never gave it to Sean afterwards because it made her feel bad or something. So I never knew. And I'd been trying to contact Sean for over 40 years and actually almost 44 years now. And and find out if he'd ever received that toy. And I was never able to. But then just this past February, I went to a screening of his animated short film, War is Over, which ended up winning an Academy Award. And he was there, and I was able to go up and talk to him and say, "Wow, Sean, I'm the one who co-conducted your dad's very last interview just before he was killed." And he was really happy to meet me. And I said, "And I have to ask you, did your mother by any chance give you the toy that I brought for you?" And I told him what it was, and he said, "Oh my God, yes, it was my favorite toy. I loved it. I had it for years and years." And I was so excited to hear that from him. And even though it wasn't an official radio or video interview, it was just wonderful to finally be able to talk to him. Plus, I was able to give him a copy of my book and autograph it for him, which he was thrilled about. And he said he would read it and share it with his mother. So I'm still waiting to hear back from him and find out what his thoughts are. Hopefully, they both loved it.
Yes, moments like that are quite a beauty.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you were hosting a dinner party and you could invite five guests who either are alive or passed, who would you invite?
Well, sad to say, the only Beatle that, or former Fab Four member, I should say, that I've never interviewed or met is Ringo Starr. So I would definitely love to meet up with him. And he doesn't live very far away from me. I'm in LA and he's in Beverly Hills, just a couple miles away. So I would love for it to be Ringo Starr, and I would love for it to be Paul McCartney. That would be very cool. They're the only two Fab Four members left, unfortunately, but still, that was great. And then uh, there are so many other musicians and bands that I'm still so excited about that I still go see. The Rolling Stones, all the Rolling Stones members, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, you name it. And I love Aerosmith. I love Kinks. I love AC/DC. So if I could have a dinner party and just invite so many musicians that I'm incredibly fond of, they would be a big part of it. And oh, I also love Heart with the Wilson sisters and Joan Jett and the Blackhearts. And, there are just so many musicians and bands that I'm crazy about.
Yes, absolutely, and they've changed the world forever.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really great and cool now that concerts have started up again, of course, after COVID, and that I can go see as many as possible. And, sadly, a lot of them are saying that it's their last tour, like Aerosmith coming up later this year, which makes me sad, but I will definitely see as many as possible.
Yes, absolutely. If you could get an exotic pet, what kind of companion would it be?
Exotic, huh? Um, you know, I've always wanted a camel. I've always thought they were incredibly cool looking and would be fun to have and walk around with. I've never really had an exotic pet before. My dogs have always been, as I mentioned, a Chihuahua, and I've also had poodles. But I'd love to have a camel. I think that would be really cool.
Nice, nice.
Thank you.
Welcome. If you could get rid of one holiday, what holiday would that be?
Well, I hate to say it, but probably Mother's Day because my mother has passed away. And as I write about in my book, I was raised by a dysfunctional family, mainly my mother, who was single until she remarried a fairly nasty stepfather. And so Mother's Day was never big or important for me or for her. I was a solo child that she never really wanted to have. And unfortunately, treated me poorly because of that. And even though before she passed away, I did try and improve our relationship and was able to somewhat, but it still was not a great upbringing. And that's why I bring it up in my book and talk about how that led to my career. Because basically, thanks to my dysfunctional family upbringing, that's what made me want to listen to music so much, even before I was a toddler. And I got a transistor radio and earplugs and was able to spend the entire night listening to AM radio at the time, even before I was ever in school. And so that excited me about so many artists, everyone from Little Richard to Chubby Checker to the Beach Boys to eventually the Beatles. And that made me think all along, wow, I want to grow up and work with music. And I never thought I was a music maker or a musician, but I thought I'll find some way to be with musicians. And fortunately, I was able to.
That's great.
I think so too.
Yes. What is your favorite quote?
From John Lennon.
Well, yes, that too.
Well, I had a lot of fun during the John and Yoko interview. The first part of the interview with John, actually, my co interviewer, Dave Sholin, and I had a lot of great questions to ask. And our uh, Warner Brothers Geffen Records exec, Bert Keane, wanted to know especially about John raising his son and the family life and everything, because he had a 5-year-old son too. So he started asking about that. And John was, fine about talking about it and everything. But I could tell after a while that John was thinking, gee, enough about family already. Let's talk about our music and double fantasy. And so I said, John, I want to ask you about getting the urge to make music again. And I emphasized that. And John burst in with his super loud, funny, and affectionate reply. Oh, it came over me all of a sudden, love. I didn't know what came over me. And everyone laughed while I reacted confidently to his endearing response. I know, I said. It was like you were possessed. And he says, I was possessed by this rock and roll devil. And more laughter from everybody there. And he said, was that your question? Did I interrupt you? And I said, no, you got it. And I was smiling like crazy as he and Yoko went on to discuss their work and the love that went into creating double fantasy. And then John added, just suddenly I had, like, if you'll pardon the expression, diarrhea of creativity. And when he said that and started talking to Yoko about their inspiration for the songs, I was laughing, and so was everybody else. And it just started our interview off about that incredible album so well. And I love talking to John because he validated me and my questions that I asked and the points I made and the comments I brought up. And he would say, excellent. Yes, love, exactly. And that was thrilling for me.
That's nice.
It was.
Absolutely. Where was the most beautiful place you've ever been to?
Oh, that's a good question. I've been to so many. I mean, I loved Bali, as I said. Um, Indonesia was amazing, but the island of Bali was the most beautiful part of that entire country. And New Zealand as a country was absolutely beautiful, and the beaches there great too. And here in the United States, New Orleans is incredible, and I love New York too. I love Seattle, Washington. That's beautiful. And San Francisco to me will always be beautiful. And then where I first went to college, Santa Cruz, incredible. The campus was on it was like in a forest almost, and it was incredibly beautiful. And just a little further away was the beach, and that was beautiful too. And so I've spent a lot of my life in incredibly beautiful places.
Sweet. What could you give a 40-minute presentation on without any preparation?
Probably the John Lennon and Yoko Ono interview, because even though this December it will be 44 years since it happened, and the older I get, the more memory issues I have, I still remember it somewhat like it was yesterday because it's been so important to me, and I came out of it feeling so tragic and so guilty in a lot of ways, as well as feeling so incredible about having made friends for life. It's just, it's something I could always and will always, no doubt, talk about at length.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the best way to travel?
I'm sorry, what?
What is the best way to travel?
Well, there's the only way to travel for me, which is basically by airplane or car. I'm not a boat person. I really never have been, and not necessarily because I have gotten seasick quite a bit over my life, but it's just something I've never felt as comfortable with going on cruises or anything like that. So I'm more of an airline person because it seems quicker and that I can do things while I'm on the plane, everything from reading to on my computer to watching TV if I want to talking to people. So that's exciting for me.
Yep, it sure is. What is something people are always surprised to learn about you?
No doubt that I co-conducted John Lennon's last interview mere hours before he was shot and killed. Whenever people find that out, and I didn't talk about it for quite a while, for years after it happened, because I was, as I mentioned, feeling so guilty and embarrassed and tragic. Um, when they did find out, their jaws would drop and say, "Oh my God, what was it like?" and ask me all kind of questions. And then they would ask me questions and say, "When are you going to write your book?" And as I said in the introductory first chapter of my book, I just, it took me so long. It took me years and years and years. And finally, I was able to say, now, I'm writing it now. And that was just when I started back in 2020. So that's definitely important to me.
Yeah, indeed. And that is all we have for this episode. It was great having you on, Laurie, talking about your works as an author and also in interviewing rock stars and many of your related media work. It's been great.
Well, thank you. I've had a good time too. And I've had especially a fun time answering questions that, have to do with places I love and traveling, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And until next time, stay tuned for more.